When I got the call that my father had collapsed, I didn't cry right away. I just stood there in my kitchen, holding the phone, watching the steam rise from my coffee cup. My brother's voice was calm on the other end. Too calm. He said the words slowly, like he was reading from a script. "Dad's in the hospital, heart attack. They're running tests. I'll handle everything. Don't worry. Don't worry." Those two words felt strange, like a door closing softly in my face. I wanted to ask which hospital. I wanted to know if Dad was awake. I wanted to hear his voice, even if it was weak. But my brother had already moved on to logistics. He was talking about doctors and insurance and who would stay with Dad tonight. He made it sound like a business meeting. And then he said something that made my chest feel tight. "I'll keep you updated. You don't need to come right now. It's under control." Under control. As if my father's life was a project. As if I was just someone on a mailing list. I hung up and stood there for a long time. My husband came into the kitchen and asked what was wrong. I told him. He said we should drive to the hospital right away, but I didn't move. Something inside me felt frozen. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was something else. A feeling I had been ignoring for years. The feeling that somewhere along the way I had stopped being part of the decisions in my own family. I didn't know it then, but that phone call was just the beginning. Over the next few months, I would watch my brother take control of everything. Our father's health, his money, his home, his final days. And I would stand on the outside, trying to understand how I became a stranger in my own family story. This is what happened. This is how it felt, and this is what I learned when it was already too late. Let me tell you about my family first. Because none of this will make sense unless you understand how we used to be. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone. My father worked at the post office for 37 years. My mother was a school teacher. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. My brother, Daniel, was 3 years older than me. People always said he looked like Dad. Same serious face. Same quiet way of thinking before he spoke. I looked like my mother. Soft features. Always smiling. Always trying to keep the peace. When we were kids, Daniel and I were close. Not in the way some siblings are, where they talk about everything. But we were a team. He walked me to school. He scared away the boys who teased me. When our dog died, he was the one who held my hand at the little funeral we made in the backyard. I remember thinking he would always protect me. Our mother died when I was 22. Cancer. It happened fast. One day she was complaining about being tired, and 6 months later she was gone. Dad fell apart. He stopped shaving. Stopped going to church. He would sit in his chair and stare at the TV without watching it. Daniel had just gotten married then. His wife, Catherine, was nice but distant. She didn't like mess or emotion. She wanted everything organized. Daniel stepped in. He started handling Dad's bills. He took him to doctor appointments. He made sure the house didn't fall into chaos. I was grateful. I was still in college, trying to finish my degree, trying to process my own grief. I thought my brother was being kind. I thought he was just helping. But looking back now, I see that was when it started. That was when Daniel began to see himself as the one in charge. The responsible one, the decision maker. And I became the younger sister who needed protecting. The one who didn't need to be bothered with the hard stuff. I got married 3 years later. My husband Tom was a good man, steady, patient. We moved 2 hours away for his job. I started teaching at an elementary school. We had 2 kids. Life got busy. I called Dad every week. I visited on holidays, but I wasn't there every day like Daniel was. He lived 15 minutes from Dad. He stopped by after work. He mowed the lawn. He fixed the leaking sink. I didn't feel guilty about it then. I thought this was just how families worked. The one who lived closer did more. That seemed fair. Dad seemed okay. He had his routines. He went to the diner every morning for coffee. He played cards with his friends on Thursdays. He talked about Mom sometimes, but not in a sad way anymore. Just in a way that meant he missed her. We all missed her. Daniel and I didn't talk much during those years. Maybe once a month. Mostly about Dad. "How's he doing?" I would ask. "He's fine," Daniel would say. Short answers. No details. I didn't push. I trusted him. But there were small moments. Little things I didn't think much about at the time. Once, I suggested we take Dad on a trip for his 70th birthday. Maybe to the mountains. He always talked about wanting to see the mountains. Daniel said no. He said Dad was too old for travel. That it would be too stressful. I didn't argue. Daniel knew Dad's health better than I did. Another time I asked if we should get Dad a new hearing aid. His old one wasn't working well. Daniel said he'd look into it. But months passed and nothing happened. When I brought it up again, Daniel got annoyed. He said I didn't understand how expensive those things were. That Dad was managing fine. I started to feel like I was bothering him, like I was being difficult. So I stopped making suggestions. I just asked how Dad was, listened to the short answers, and went back to my life. I thought I was respecting my brother's effort. I thought I was being a good sister by not adding to his burden. I didn't realize I was slowly disappearing from my father's life. I didn't realize that decisions were being made without me. I didn't realize that one day, when it really mattered, I would have no voice at all. And I didn't realize that my silence was teaching my brother that I didn't need to be included, that I didn't want to be, that I was fine being kept at a distance. By the time I understood what was happening, the patterns were already set. The roles were already assigned, and changing them would feel like starting a war. Dad's health started to decline slowly. It wasn't sudden. It was the kind of thing you could ignore if you wanted to. A little more forgetful, a little slower getting up from his chair. He stopped going to the diner as often, stopped playing cards. I noticed it during my visits. I would ask him questions and he would pause, like he was searching for the answer in his mind. Sometimes he would call me by my mother's name. Just for a second. Then he would correct himself and laugh. But it wasn't a real laugh. It was the laugh people do when they're embarrassed. I mentioned it to Daniel. I said, "Have you noticed Dad seems more confused lately?" Daniel brushed it off. He said Dad was just getting older, that it was normal. He said the doctor had checked him and everything was fine, just age. I wanted to believe him. But something felt off. Then one day, Dad called me. It was the middle of the afternoon. He sounded upset. He said he couldn't find his glasses. He said he had been looking for an hour. I stayed on the phone with him and we looked together. Finally, he found them on top of his head. We laughed. But after I hung up, I sat there feeling worried. I called Daniel. "I think we need to have Dad checked again," I said. "He's forgetting things." He called me upset about his glasses. Daniel sighed. The kind of sigh that meant he was annoyed. "He's fine. He just had a bad day. You're overreacting." "I'm not overreacting," I said. "I'm worried." "You don't see him every day like I do," Daniel said. "Trust me. He's fine." I didn't know what to say to that. He was right. I didn't see Dad every day, so maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was making something out of nothing. But the worry stayed with me. A few months later, I went to visit Dad for his birthday. I brought a cake. Tom and the kids came with me. When we got there, Dad seemed happy to see us. But there was something different. He kept asking the same questions. "How was the drive?" he would ask. I would answer. 10 minutes later, he would ask again. The kids noticed. My youngest whispered to me, "Why does Grandpa keep asking the same thing?" I didn't have a good answer. After we sang happy birthday and ate cake, I went into the kitchen to wash dishes. Catherine was there. She was wiping down the counters. We made small talk. Then I said, "Do you think Dad seems okay?" She didn't look at me. She kept wiping. "Daniel says he's fine." "I know, but I'm worried. He's repeating himself a lot." Catherine stopped and looked at me. Her face was hard to read. "Daniel is doing his best. This isn't easy on him, you know." I felt a flare of frustration. "I know it's not easy. I'm not saying he's not doing a good job. I just think we should get Dad checked." We did. The doctor said it's normal aging. "Maybe we should get a second opinion." Catherine put down the towel. She looked at me like I had said something offensive. "Daniel handles everything for your father. He's the one who goes to the appointments. He's the one who deals with the bills in the house and everything else. If he says Dad is fine, then Dad is fine. You can't just swoop in once every few months and start making demands." Her words hit me like cold water. I stood there, holding a dish, not knowing what to say. I wasn't making demands. I was just asking a question. I was just worried. But that's not how she saw it. And I realized that's not how Daniel saw it either. I went back home that night feeling small, feeling like I had done something wrong. Tom asked me what was bothering me. I told him. He said I should talk to Daniel. Really talk to him. Not just ask questions, but have a real conversation. I tried. I called Daniel a few days later. I said I wanted to talk about Dad. I said I was worried and I wanted to be more involved. I wanted to know what the doctors were saying. I wanted to come to appointments. Daniel's voice was calm but firm. "I appreciate that you care, but I've got this under control. You live 2 hours away. You have your own family. I don't want to burden you with all the details." "It's not a burden," I said. "He's my father too." There was a pause, a long one. Then Daniel said, "I know, but you haven't been around. You don't see the day-to-day stuff. I do, and I'm telling you, I've got it handled." I felt a lump in my throat. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that just because I lived farther away didn't mean I cared less, but I didn't say any of that. I just said okay, and we hung up. I cried that night. Not loud crying, just quiet tears while I sat in the dark living room. Tom came and sat beside me. He didn't say anything. He just held my hand. I felt helpless. I felt like my brother had built a wall around our father, and I wasn't allowed through. Over the next few months, I tried to visit more often. But every time I did, I felt like an outsider. Daniel and Catherine had routines. They knew where everything was. They knew what Dad liked to eat and when he took his pills. I felt like a guest in my father's house. One time, I offered to take Dad to a doctor's appointment. Daniel said no. He said it was already scheduled and he had it covered. I offered to go with them. He said it wasn't necessary. Another time, I suggested we hire someone to help clean the house. Dad's place was getting messy. Daniel said it was fine, that he and Catherine were managing. I started to feel like every idea I had was dismissed. Every concern was brushed aside. And every time I tried to be involved, I was told it wasn't needed. I talked to a friend about it. She said, "It sounds like your brother is being controlling." I didn't want to believe that. I wanted to believe he was just trying to help, that he was just stressed. But deep down I felt it too. He was controlling, and I had let him. Then came the phone call. The one I told you about at the beginning. The one where Daniel told me Dad had a heart attack. The one where he said I didn't need to come right away. That's when everything changed. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a few dismissed suggestions. This was about being shut out completely. I drove to the hospital that night. I didn't care what Daniel said. Tom came with me. We left the kids with my neighbor and drove through the dark. My hands were shaking the whole way. When we got to the hospital, I went straight to the cardiac unit. The nurse at the desk asked who I was there to see. I said my father's name. She checked her computer and then asked, "Are you family?" "Yes, I'm his daughter." She nodded and told me the room number. My heart was pounding as we walked down the hall. I didn't know what I would find. I didn't know if Dad would be awake, if he would recognize me, if he would be okay. When I got to the room, Daniel was there. He was sitting in a chair beside the bed, looking at his phone. Dad was asleep. He looked so small in that hospital bed. His face was pale. There were wires and tubes everywhere. I walked in quietly. Daniel looked up. He seemed surprised to see me. "I thought I told you not to come tonight," he said. His voice was low but sharp. "He's my father," I said. Of course I came. Daniel stood up. He looked tired, annoyed. "There's nothing you can do right now. The doctors are handling it. He needs rest." I ignored him and walked to Dad's bedside. I took his hand. It felt cold. I looked at his face and tears started to fall. I couldn't help it. Tom stood near the door, quiet. He always knew when to give me space. Daniel walked over to me. He put his hand on my shoulder, not in a comforting way, in a way that meant he wanted me to move. "You should go home. Get some rest. I'll call you in the morning with an update." I turned to look at him. "I'm staying." "There's no point. He's sedated. He won't even know you're here." "I'll know," I said. Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't say anything else. He just sat back down in his chair. I stayed. Tom went to get coffee. I sat on the other side of Dad's bed and held his hand. I talked to him softly, even though he couldn't hear me. I told him I was there. I told him I loved him. I told him I loved him. I told him I was sorry I hadn't been around more. Hours passed. Daniel didn't say much. He answered emails on his phone, made a few calls in the hallway, came back and sat in silence. At some point, a doctor came in. She introduced herself and started explaining Dad's condition. She used a lot of medical terms I didn't understand. She said the heart attack was serious, but they had managed to stabilize him. She said they would need to monitor him closely over the next few days. I asked questions. "What caused it? What's the treatment plan? What happens next?" The doctor answered patiently. She was kind. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "We'll also need to discuss long-term care. He's going to need support when he leaves the hospital. Possibly in-home care or assisted living." I looked at Daniel. He didn't look surprised. He just nodded. "Wait," I said. "Have you already talked about this?" The doctor looked between us. "I spoke with Mr. Daniel earlier, yes. He's listed as the primary contact and power of attorney." Power of attorney. The words echoed in my head. "When did that happen?" I asked Daniel. "A few years ago," he said. "Dad wanted to make sure everything was in order. And you didn't think to tell me. It didn't seem necessary. You weren't involved in his day-to-day care." The doctor looked uncomfortable. She said she would give us some privacy and left. I stood there, staring at my brother. What else haven't you told me? Nothing. I've been handling things, like I always do. Handling things? Or controlling things? Daniel's face went cold. I've been taking care of Dad while you've been living your life 2 hours away. Don't act like you suddenly care now. His words cut deep. I felt anger rise in my chest. I've always cared. You just never let me be part of anything. You never wanted to be part of it. You were happy to let me do everything. That's not true, isn't it? Every time I called you about something, you said, "Whatever you think is best, Daniel." You didn't want the responsibility, so I took it. I opened my mouth to argue, but I stopped, because part of what he said was true. I had said that. I had deferred to him. But not because I didn't care. Because I trusted him. Because I thought we were working together, but we weren't. He had been working alone, and he wanted it that way. I want to be involved now, I said quietly. I want to know what's happening. I want to be part of the decisions. Daniel shook his head. It's too late for that. Everything is already set up. I have power of attorney. I've been managing his finances. I know what he wants. What he wants, or what you want, or what you want. Don't do that. Don't make me the bad guy here. Then talk to me. Include me. Stop shutting me out. Daniel stood up and grabbed his jacket. I'm going home. I'll be back in the morning. You should go home too. He walked out. Just like that. He left me standing there, shaking with anger and sadness and confusion. Tom came back with the coffee. He saw my face and didn't ask questions. He just hugged me. I spent the night in that hospital room. I didn't sleep. I just sat with Dad and thought about everything. About how I had let this happen. About how I had let this happen. About how I had stepped back little by little until I wasn't part of anything anymore. And I realized something that hurt even more than Daniel's words. I was angry at him, but I was also angry at myself. Dad woke up the next morning. His eyes opened slowly, and he looked around the room, confused. When he saw me, he smiled. A weak smile, but a smile. Hey, sweetheart, he whispered. I squeezed his hand. Hey, Dad, how are you feeling? Tired, he said. What happened? Your heart gave us a scare. But you're okay now. You're in the hospital. He nodded slowly. Then he looked around. Where's Daniel? He went home to rest. He'll be back soon. Dad closed his eyes again. Good. He takes care of everything. I felt a tightness in my chest. Even Dad saw Daniel as the one in charge. Maybe he always had. Over the next few days, I stayed close. I took time off work. I stayed at a hotel nearby so I could be at the hospital every day. Tom went back home to be with the kids, but he called me every night. Daniel came and went. We barely spoke. When we did, it was only about Dad's condition, practical things. No emotions. No apologies. The doctors said Dad would need to go to a rehabilitation center for a few weeks before he could go home. They also said he couldn't live alone anymore. He would need help. Either in-home care or a move to assisted living. I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to sit down with Daniel and Dad and figure out what was best together. But Daniel had already made calls. He had already looked at facilities. He had already started the paperwork. One afternoon, I confronted him in the hospital cafeteria. We need to talk, I said. Daniel looked up from his sandwich. About what? About Dad. About what happens next. I want to be part of the decision. I've already made the decision. He's going to Pine Grove. It's a good facility. Clean. Good staff. Did you ask him what he wants? He wants what's best, and that's Pine Grove. How do you know? Did he actually say that? Daniel put down his sandwich. He looked exhausted. I know, Dad. I know what he needs. So do I said. He's my father, too. We stared at each other. It felt like a standoff. Finally, Daniel spoke. His voice was quieter. Why now? Why do you care so much now? The question surprised me. I've always cared. No, you didn't. You called once a week. You visited on holidays. You asked me to handle everything. And I did. For years, I did. And now, when things are hard, you suddenly want to be involved. I felt tears prick my eyes. I trusted you. I thought we were sharing the responsibility. Sharing? Daniel laughed bitterly. You weren't sharing. You were absent. That's not fair, isn't it? I didn't know what to say. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had been absent, but not because I didn't care. Because I didn't know how to push my way in. Because every time I tried, I was told it wasn't necessary. I'm sorry, I said, my voice cracked. I'm sorry I wasn't there more. I'm sorry I let you handle everything. But I'm here now, and I'm asking you, please, let me be part of this. Daniel looked at me for a long time. I saw something in his face I hadn't seen before. Hurt. He wasn't just angry, he was hurt. Do you know what it's like, he said quietly, to be the one who does everything and never hear thank you, to cancel plans because Dad needed something, to spend every weekend fixing his house or taking him to appointments, and you got to live your life, you got to focus on your kids and your job, and I was okay with that, I didn't mind, but don't come in now and act like I shut you out. You shut yourself out. His words hit me hard, because there was truth in them. I had focused on my life. I had let him handle Dad because it was easier. And now I was angry at him for doing exactly what I had allowed. We sat in silence. The cafeteria noise buzzed around us. People eating, talking, laughing, and we just sat there, two siblings who had drifted so far apart we didn't know how to find each other again. Finally, I spoke. You're right. I should have been more involved. I should have pushed harder. I should have been there. And I'm sorry. I can't change the past, but I want to try now. I want to be here for Dad, and I want us to make decisions together. Not because I don't trust you, but because he's our father. Both of ours. Daniel rubbed his face with his hands. He looked tired. So tired. I don't know how to do that. I've been doing this alone for so long. I know, and I'm sorry. But let's try. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. He just nodded. A small nod, but it was something. Over the next few weeks, things slowly changed. It wasn't easy. Daniel still made a lot of decisions, but he started including me. He would call me before he did something. He would ask my opinion. Sometimes he still ignored it, but at least he asked. I visited Dad more. I took vacation days. I rearranged my schedule. I sat with him during his rehab sessions. I helped him with his exercises. I was there, and Daniel saw that. He saw that I wasn't just showing up out of guilt, that I genuinely wanted to be part of Dad's life. One day we were both visiting Dad at the rehab center. Dad was napping. Daniel and I sat in the lounge area with bad coffee. I talked to Pine Grove, Daniel said. They have a spot available next month. I took a breath. Can we visit it first? Together? Daniel looked at me. Then he nodded. Yeah, we can do that. It was a small thing, but it felt big. We visited Pine Grove the next week. We walked through the halls. We met the staff. We saw the rooms. It was nice. Clean. Bright. But something felt off. It felt too institutional. Too far from home. Afterward, we sat in Daniel's car in the parking lot. What did you think? He asked. I hesitated. It's nice, but I don't know if Dad would be happy there. Daniel was quiet. Then he said, yeah, I felt that too. We looked at each other, and for the first time in a long time, we were on the same page. What if we looked at in-home care instead? I said. What if we hired someone to help him at his house? That's more expensive. We could split the cost, or we could figure it out together. Daniel thought about it. Then he nodded. Okay, let's look into it. We did. We found an agency. We interviewed caregivers. We found someone Dad liked. A kind woman named Rosa who reminded him of my mother. She started coming 3 times a week, then 5 times a week, and Dad got to stay in his home. In his chair, with his routines. It wasn't perfect. There were hard days. There were arguments between Daniel and me about what was best. But we worked through them. We learned to talk, to listen, to compromise, and Dad got better. Not back to how he was, but better. He smiled more. He seemed more like himself. One afternoon, I was sitting with Dad in his living room. Daniel was there too, fixing a loose cabinet in the kitchen. Dad looked at me and said, I'm glad you're here more. I felt my throat tighten. Me too, Dad. You and Daniel, he said. You're good kids. I'm proud of you both. I looked over at Daniel. He had stopped working and was looking at us. Our eyes met, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. My brother. Not the person in charge, not the one making all the decisions, just my brother. He gave me a small smile. I smiled back. We were going to be okay. Dad lived for 3 more years after that heart attack. They weren't easy years. There were more hospital visits, more scares, more late-night phone calls. But Daniel and I faced them together. We learned how to communicate. We learned how to make decisions as a team. We learned that being family doesn't mean one person carries everything. It means sharing the weight. Dad passed away on a quiet Sunday morning in his sleep. Rosa found him. She called Daniel. Daniel called me. We went to the house together. We sat with him. We cried together. At the funeral, Daniel gave the eulogy. He talked about Dad's life, his work, his love for our mother, his kindness. And then he said something that made me cry. He said, "My sister and I didn't always agree on how to care for our father. But in the end, we learned that loving someone means letting others love them too." Dad taught us that. He taught us that family isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. It's about trying. And it's about forgiving each other when we get it wrong. After the funeral, people came to the house. We served food. We shared stories. And when everyone left, Daniel and I sat on the porch, just the two of us. "I'm sorry," he said, "for shutting you out, for making you feel like you didn't matter." "I'm sorry too," I said, "for stepping back, for not fighting harder to be involved." We sat in silence for a while. Then Daniel said, "We did okay in the end, didn't we?" I nodded. "Yeah, we did." Looking back now, I realized that my father's illness was a gift in a strange way. Not the illness itself, but what it taught us. It taught me that I can't assume someone will include me. I have to show up. I have to speak up. I have to be present. And it taught Daniel that he can't carry everything alone. That asking for help isn't weakness. That sharing responsibility isn't losing control. We both learned that family is complicated. That love isn't always easy. That sometimes the people we care about the most are the ones we hurt without meaning to. If you're reading this or listening to this and you recognize yourself in my story, I want you to know something. It's not too late. It's never too late to start showing up, to start speaking up, to start being part of the decisions. Don't wait for a crisis. Don't wait for a phone call that changes everything. Start now. Call your family. Ask the hard questions. Have the uncomfortable conversations. Be present. And if you're the one carrying everything, like my brother was, please know that letting others in doesn't mean you failed. It means you're strong enough to share the weight. It means you're wise enough to know you don't have to do it alone. Life is short. Family is messy, but love is worth fighting for. Even when it's hard. Even when it means admitting you were wrong. Even when it means changing patterns that have been in place for years. My father is gone now, but the lessons he taught us, even in his illness, remain. I carry them with me every day. I see my brother more often now. We talk about real things. We don't always agree. But we listen. And that's enough. I think about Dad often. I think about his quiet strength, his gentle way of loving us. And I think about how, in the end, he brought us back together. Not by what he said, but by what he needed. He needed both of us. And we learned to be there for him. Together. That's the thing about family. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. It's about forgiving. It's about trying. And it's about learning that love means making room for each other, even when it feels crowded, even when it feels uncomfortable, because in the end, that's all we have. Each other. I miss my father every day, but I'm grateful for what his illness taught me. I'm grateful that I got to be there, that I fought to be included, that I didn't give up. And I'm grateful for my brother. For the patience he showed me, for the forgiveness he gave me, for the partnership we built in the midst of pain. If there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this: don't wait, don't assume, don't stay silent, show up, speak up, be part of the story while you still can, because one day the people we love will be gone, and all we'll have left are the memories, the moments, the choices we made. Make the choice to be present, make the choice to be involved, make the choice to love fully, even when it's hard. That's what I learned. That's what I carry with me. And that's what I hope you'll remember too. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for letting me share this part of my heart with you. I hope it helps. I hope it reminds you that you're not alone in your struggles. That families are complicated everywhere. And that healing is always possible if we're willing to try. Take care of each other. Forgive each other. And show up for each other. That's all we can do. And it's enough. It's enough.